Thank you for joining us for a very important episode of Weezy Unhoused. All of my episodes are important, but this is one that has a sense of urgency that I cannot overemphasize. That is one that grips our communities, housed and unhoused, but particularly unhoused. The holidays has left us with some tragedies. In particular, a young football player who took his life because of his family situation of being unhoused. And in our own community here in Los Angeles, a young lady gave up her life because being unhoused was too much of a burden to bear. I'm Theo Henderson, and I am an unhoused resident. I created this podcast to educate and listen to the unhoused perspective from other unhoused people. We don't blame, ridicule, finger wag, or judge unhoused people. Period. We have biased media, violent and hostile law enforcement, and lying city officials to do that. I also wanted to introduce you to some guests that is very important that we all have a stake in this particular issue, not only from housing, but from the mental health perspective. We have Meredith Spriggs, who's going to be on later on, who was unhoused herself and used her challenges and depression and stresses to create something positive out of a challenging situation. We also have Tondo Kaduka, a formerly unhoused woman herself, who suffers from some health challenges, and how she uses her platform to speak for the unhoused and the voiceless in this particular time. As I go forward and look forward to this time, we are all facing an amount of stress. To be unhoused is a full-time job that requires constant trauma, constant traumatic events. And right now, the traumatic events are caused by the law enforcement and city council officials. Facing these real threats creates traumas, fresh and old. How we deal with it is in a divergent ways. This takes its toll on one's mental health. For some people, prolonged stress is from trauma. And let's take a step back and define what trauma is for this episode. Now, I went and did some research, and I found a renowned traumatologist and a renowned neurologist by the name of Dr. Robert Skinner. And he defines trauma as any negative life event that occurs in a position of relative helplessness. Quick question. Does the unhoused experience trauma? Yes, they do. Now, here is a deeper question. Who provides those traumatic events? Let me start off and tell you who have been starting and has kept up this traumatic event. Nury Martinez. On Wednesday, January 8th, 2020, she ordered hundreds of unhoused people displaced. She lied. She claimed and she showed pictures of people being rescued in fire and floods to justify her displacing and causing intense trauma for over hundreds of people, saying that she's helping them. When I interviewed these people that had been displaced and traumatized, they have clearly stated that they had nowhere to go. There was no services offered, no motel vouchers. There was nothing. Right now, many of their belongings are gone, and right now they're spending the cold nights with nothing, causing illnesses. They lost out on medication. They lost out on the necessary IDs if they needed to go get the difficult things like birth certificates and things like that if they wanted to find jobs or places that social services agencies require. They are without anything. That is City Council Nury Martinez. Her justification for this brutal, cruel act was they were service resistant. If you go to her meeting, she makes no qualms about her disdain for unhoused people. She has actually pushed for law enforcement to continue to traumatize vulnerable unhoused people. The next person would be Bloomingfield. Bloomingfield's place, he had displaced 40 people when another sweep. The next person that was responsible is Catherine Berger over in Chatsworth, John Lee. They are the ones that listen to, they're Republican, they listen to Dr. Drew Pinsky, his hostile and hatred-filled and ignorant narrative on unhoused people. He has displaced them. How can you sleep on the street while wealthy people walk by without being angry and depressed? Feeling isolated from your human connection. That is according to Sasha Parago. Karl Marx said there was a high rate of suicides with the street workers, and when they found out one of the major causes, it was due to being unhoused and having poverty as their issue. Relative helplessness could be seen in the unhoused community on Tuesday, 7th of January, when Bloomingfield displaced 30 unhoused people during a police raid that created a new traumatic incident. Councilmen could be heard using Nazi-era remarks when remarking about unhoused people, about quality of life issues. Another culprit is John Lee, who is causing trauma as we speak to the people over in Chatsworth. There's also the Mitch O'Farrell. He's causing trauma to the people in Echo Park. So here it is: trauma, mental health issues, fear, displacement, helplessness. These key issues in this episode will continue to be recurring as we delve deeper into the experiences of unhoused people and how they deal with it. The question I asked in my first episode is, where are all the good people that are to stand up? The part of the problem that I see, and is my observation when I have interviewed countless of unhoused people all across Los Angeles, is the fact, this delusion that the police are there to help and they're there to do law and order. From my observation, the primary problem is the cozy relationships with the police officers, the business owners, and the Los Angeles Sanitation Department. They are in lockstep in this terrorizing, trauma-induced environment. This relieves the responsibility up to our community in order for us to do something about it. We must hold them accountable, because right now they are the criminals, and we have delusion, and we have allowed them to be criminalizing unhoused people. And as long as we allow these criminals to go unabated just because they have a badge and a gun and they use whispers in council meetings, does not mean that they are law-abiding citizens. We need to enlist the United Nations. We need to enlist the FBI. We need to be hammering on their door and having them, in no uncertain terms, being investigated. If there was any unhoused or housed person that had committed these many civil rights violations, you can rest assured FBI would have intervened on our behalf. And not only that, we should have them do the same thing for law-breaking law enforcement and civil servants. This is Unhoused News. I'm Theo Henderson reporting on the current issues of the day. Meredith Spriggs is helping unhoused people reintegrate with low-barrier housing and other services that only the veterans VOA has been willing to step forward and make a change in a lot of the unhoused lives. Unhoused war veteran Wayne Green took his own life. The family states the Army did not help him after leaving the Army. Unhoused Advocate nonprofit has filed a $50 million lawsuit against the city of Denver for the camping ban tickets. Los Angeles needs to take a page out of this notebook. Nashville 26-year-old Katie Quackenbush, singer, charged with attempted murder of shooting an unhoused man, Gerald Melton, over where he was sleeping. San Antonio police officer Matthew Luckhurst, who handed a feces sandwich to an unhoused man, wins his termination appeal. And that was Unhoused News. Good morning. This is Theo Henderson from Streetwatch Chinatown. I'm here in the studios today with Meredith. I wanted to get her Spriggs. I didn't want to say Springs. Spriggs. She is the kind officer of Caridad Industries, as well as she has had some experience in the San Diego rescue missions. So without further ado, let's welcome our new guest. Hello, Meredith.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I want to just start off and let the listeners hear a little bit about your story. Could you give us a little bit of who you are?
Sure. So we're actually not far from where I was born. I was born in Pasadena, although I never lived there, but all my family is mainly from Southern California, so LA, San Diego, but grew up in Illinois, was raised there, went to seminary school to be a pastor, and was working as a youth pastor in a university when that all kind of fell apart in 2008. Lost both of my jobs, and it was the week that the market crashed. So with a specialized degree like that, I found myself unable to afford to live indoors in San Diego, started living out of my car, and eventually my car got towed because I couldn't afford the tickets. So between couch surfing and spots at the beach, that was what I did to survive. So was homeless for a year, and then and got into homeless services and started caridad when I got back on my feet.
It sounds like a similar story to mine. Like I'm from Chicago, so we went and have some Illinois. Yeah. So
wait. Are you Cubs or White Sox?
I'm Cubs.
All right, we can keep doing the interview then.
So here's the thing: is like what all of us have seen in common is like no one day looked out the street and says, you know what, it would be much more appealing to be out here in the streets. Do you agree?
I would agree, and I think that's so common that people have the misperception that all homeless want to be homeless, or they have drug or alcohol abuse issues, or they have a mental health condition. So I think there are as many different reasons for people being homeless as there are grains of sand on the beach.
So after you having this experience, because I was talking to a couple of my friends about my situation, and when I became unhoused, I too had some of the internalized stereotypes, even in the house, because there are layers of unhoused people that society believes that are the worthy unhoused, contrastly than the unworthy unhoused. But now I've came around in my thinking and believe we all deserve to be housed, mm-hmm. and we all deserve to get the treatment and help that we need, no matter what our circumstances are. So with that said, I want to ask you, in San Diego, what is your experience, because you are working with unhoused people? What is your experience with that?
Actually, I'm in Las Vegas now.
Oh, so, sorry, Las Vegas. Okay. My apologies.
Don't put me back there. It's really expensive in San Diego.
Yeah.
So right now what we're doing is we're doing a garden project. So it's farm reintegration. So using garden therapy, it's an indoor hydroponic farm, and we're hiring veterans. And I didn't set out to do the project to just work with veterans. I wanted to do any homeless, but U.S. Vets was the only agency that would guarantee our guys and gals we hire would be indoors. So we're hiring them. U.S. Vets is housing them. And it's a little bit different. It's low barriers. Back to what you said about, people just need help meeting them where they're at. So it's really hard. Don't tell my team this, but it's really hard to get fired. Mm-hmm. I mean, stuff happens and we get that. And a lot of these people, it's their first job back in the workforce. And so we know there's going to be hiccups. So like we had a gentleman, he missed 2 days of work. We worked with his case manager. That's okay. He didn't lose his job, but we tried to figure out what was wrong. Let's get to the root of that. Let's help it. And then when he shows back up, he's got a job again. So it's a different approach, but I'm excited that we get to try this and do this with our partners.
I have to say, one of the things that I noticed, like, for example, there are 8 different type of agencies, and I want to get your perspective on, are you pro shelters or are you pro a diverse approach? For me, shelters didn't work for me, and I had to use another approach. I'm working on my housing as we speak, but I found shelters to be counterproductive, but I wanted to see what your thoughts is.
Interesting. I used to work at the San Diego Rescue Mission, and I was really lucky because we had a wing. It was called the Recuperative Care Unit, and back to what I was saying, it was low barriers. So this is really unheard of and revolutionary for its time at the gospel as a gospel mission, but we didn't have a sobriety requirement. Mm-hmm. We just had, it was a medical ward, so people were released from the hospital that were not well enough for the streets, but well enough to be released. And so it was different in that they could stay as long as they needed to, as long as they were resting and taking care of getting well. And then the only reason we had a curfew, which they could get a pass and come back later. If they just called even, we would let them come in later. But it was just for med times, and it was only because they had to be on their meds. Some of them were pretty serious, like HIV AIDS, some as little as like a broken leg. But so basically just so they could rest and get well. But I mean, we had a lot of fun, and that was always the joke at the rescue mission. They party up on the top floor, which is what we were on, because they didn't have to be sober to be in there. So I loved that. And so I feel like if more shelters could do that and restructure and meet people where they're at, then they wouldn't be so bad. But I think the problem is it's like a warehouse, and it becomes, we inventory people. When they come in, we don't ask them, what do you need? How can we help you? We just throw them in a room. Here's the rules, lights out, goodbye, the end. And I think there could be more humane ways to approaching shelter, like the rescue mission that I just cited, because it can be done right and be beneficial. But what we're doing right now is basically just warehousing people and keeping them out of jail.
I agree. I had 2 incidents when I went to 2 different shelters. The first shelter had, like, for example, I went to one downtown, and I don't want to say the shelter's name in case they come after me. But this shelter, for example, had a sleeping policy. But one of the rules was that you had to come in and listen to a church service, and we had to, even before we ate. If we didn't listen to the church service, we didn't eat. And after we had the church service and after we ate, we had to go up to shower. And people, like you just mentioned prior to our interview, is they have to charge their phones. And I had to charge my phone because my power was out, and I wanted to keep in touch with my case managers to get in my housing and different other things, my family and things like that in contact. So, which is a reasonable thing. I tried to charge my phone. And one of the directors of that program took my phone, and when I asked for it back, he asked me for my bed ticket and says, you got to be out for 15 days because you charged your phone. And that's one of the one of many incidents. And another one was where I was in another shelter place, and this person was zealous about curfew. And it's the place where they have the shelter is way in a very long, far-flung industrial place that we only have very limited transportation. And secondly, it was the way they communicated. It's like they treated most of the unhoused like children. So I agree with you're saying that this is a very big issue that shelters don't want to hear about. And what the other side of it is, the residents like myself don't understand is sometimes they are forced to do those rules because they have monies coming in. So,
yep. Oh yeah, it's all about funding. And I would challenge people that don't agree and think people need rules and whatever. How many of you go home at night and do you have a curfew? Are you told who you can and can't bring into your place? You know, do you have to get an excuse if you go to work every day? Do you have to get a pass to go to work? No, you don't. You get to come and go as you please. That's how the rest of the world is. And these are adults. You know, why are we treating them like children that don't know what they're doing and, you know, can't tie their own shoes? It's silly.
One also thing is like for the elderly, and I know that a couple of the elderly unhoused people that I've communicated with, they took a very big offense when they had younger population or younger staff members dictating what they can do and not do, and they took that really very seriously.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah, it's probably in the delivery too. They used to joke and call me the Mary Poppins of the rescue mission because I could get people to do anything. But it's all the delivery, and if people know you care, but if they're screaming it out like a little militaristic dictator, like that's not going to go over well with anybody in any setting.
Let's talk about too. Because one of the other experiences I wanted to get your point on, and then we'll move on to a new topic. Is the second one I mentioned was there was one where I was released to another shelter, and they had space requirements. That means that you had packages, and people in unhoused use these things for survival. And because of the tenuous relationship with shelters, a few days or this or that, and then you're out on the street, you lose everything. Yeah. And one of the reasons is that, you know, this person threw me out because he just, you know, I was questioning that. I just had the temerity to ask the question. Mm-hmm. So
in Las Vegas, it's interesting. We only have one shelter that will keep people for 7 days, and that's the rescue mission. All the other shelters you have to check out every day. Mm-hmm. So what do? And you can't keep your stuff with you. They make you check your stuff in, and often it's lost or stolen. But yeah, if that's all your worldly possessions, and people look at those bags and they think, oh, it's just clutter, it's just trash. No, it's meds, it's personal identifying documents. In some cases, it's immigration documents, doctor's appointments. Yeah, just everything that they need that you and I take for granted when we're indoors that we can keep in a safe space. And even insulin, I've had diabetics with their insulin that they have on them. So yeah, it's a whole lot of stuff that I don't think shelters take into account that we really need to do better.
I had when I was in a wheelchair or in a walker, I got wrote up about having a wheelchair because it was outside of the limitations. And crazily enough, it wasn't a recuperative care, but I needed that for my mobility.
Yeah.
But they didn't understand because they were dogmatic.
Yeah, no, nothing surprises me.
So let's get to Las Vegas. How is the unhoused situation there? So tell me a little bit about what goes on over there. I'm sure there's some similarities, but let's talk about what's going on there.
I've worked in multiple cities, and it makes me sad that I feel like in Las Vegas, we're going the wrong way. I tell people we're moving chairs around on the Titanic, but we're sinking. So we did a really great job with a federal initiative that was called Built for Zero, and that was ending veterans' homelessness. But the federal VA threw a bunch of money at that. So it's a lot easier to do stuff with money. But we were really organized. We had a great system. Actually, we were one of the top communities in the world. And then once that money dried up, it seems to have gone back to normal. And the biggest thing that I see that we're struggling with is we don't have the collaboration and total buy-in from the business community. Other places that have been successful have buy-in from the business community. So we went down. We're around 7,000 homeless. In Las Vegas, we're 5th in the country. But if you break it down by percentages, we only have 2 million in our county. So that's 1% of our population is homeless. That's a really high percentage, and it's going up. And what people don't think of, and who most of our homeless are in our community, are children, so underage, unaccompanied youth, so 18 and under, youth with multiple children, so under 18 with 2, 3, 4 babies, and a whole family, so mom, dad, and the kids. And we don't have, in our system, we have only a handful of places that can take entire families, so that leaves families to pick, do they want to separate out, mom go into a separate shelter from dad, and a lot of families choose to not, and so they stay out on the street so they can be together.
And in turn, it feeds into that stereotype of single moms and the vitriol that people at society throw at those kind of environment or population. Which brings up to another question. So what happens if you have no space available and you have a family of kids? Where do they go? Where do those families go?
In Las Vegas,
yes,
it's streets, it's parks. They just try to hide and keep the kiddos safe. If they have a car, if they're lucky enough, they stay in the car. But yeah, it's a real problem. And again, back to building a better system. We haven't done a good job of addressing that. We're trying, but right now the city of Las Vegas is kind of digging their heels in and pushing back on the efforts that we're working on.
One of the things I noticed too is like here in Los Angeles that we have a ordinance called 4118, and they are trying to clamp down on unhoused people being in parks, camping, and things like that. And I had a conversation with a homeless outreach worker who were stating that they were thinking of the kids and not having them see the people in unhoused state. But Sesame Street has now finally talked about this. They have an unhoused kid on Sesame Street. They also have a kid that's family mother is using substance usage. And so I asked the question is, if this 4118 and the Martin versus Boise ruling comes back into play, this is going to affect unhoused kids just the same as unhoused men and women. So what were your thoughts on that?
You can't criminalize away poverty. And what we're doing with these laws is we're punishing people for being poor. We know what we have, and the real issue is affordable housing. There's not affordable housing, and it's in LA especially. I used to live in San Diego and I've worked in LA. It's really hard to make a living wage and live indoors here. And it took me a while when I was in San Diego. So I think that's what people are forgetting, is that some of these people don't have maybe the support systems or, family or somebody to call when they've fallen on hard times. And so we need to step up as communities and help people. But yeah, criminalizing is basically just playing whack-a-mole with people. You're just moving them from one spot to the next. You're not really getting them to the resources that they need.
I had a close friend that stated, God helps those that help themselves, and why don't the family help? And I have answers to that. On my own family has restrictions on themselves because of the fact that they may be living in places that have rules or legislation or things of that nature that doesn't allow them, or they may be financially strapped themselves.
Yep.
So it's this myth that the family just helped out. Maybe it happened in the 50s and 60s, but it doesn't happen now because times have changed, things have gone up, stressors are everywhere, and so which ties into the next question, is that what would you tell a person that has not really much of an experience of being unhoused? What would you recommend if they found themselves the first night being unhoused? What would you suggest?
Baby wipes. And hand sanitizer. No. No, 2 things to live by. No, try to find out where your local church feeding is. If you have ID, oh my goodness, that's like, you've already like overcome like half the obstacles on the street and the hurdles to get anything. Sign up for food stamps if you have ID, because that's going to be great and a life support for you on the streets. But yeah, find out where those resources are within your walking distance. 211, if you can call out on a phone. 211 is the number you can call to get the homeless resources, and then see if there's an outreach agency nearby you. But yeah, I would even tread lightly. Not that all unhoused people are scoundrels, but I definitely had some people that I trusted on the streets that took my stuff. So just, tread lightly with who you trust and just be smart. Be smart. And then also, sidewalks are safe. You can be on the sidewalk, but don't go in the street because that will get you a ticket.
Which brings up another question, because sidewalks are safe. But let's say, for example, that you're in a neighborhood that has business improvement district or neighborhood watch groups that have, like lately, particularly in Los Angeles, there has been an uptick of support between the Los Angeles Police Department. For example, Council Member Gil Cedillo has approved the vigilante attacks of George Yu, who years ago had put a stick in had a dog or made a campaign to get me arrested and things of that nature here, and drumming up the community to support to eject me from the park and things of that nature. What do you say about what would an unhoused person needs to be aware of, and how would you suggest them to be alert when you see these business improvement, because they are obviously not our friends? So,
well, and I think I would say, because I work with the businesses too in Las Vegas and we lock horns often, but I think it's uninformed activism too. They've dehumanized, people that are housing challenged, and that's part of the problem. But I think really just don't make a mess. Don't be a jerk. If somebody asks you to leave nicely. Don't try to fight and be a hero. But also get to know maybe those players and just be polite and be friendly, and it may or may not work. Even Jesus didn't win them all.
Indeed. Well, I was one of those rebels because I stayed. And what I had, my experience was I had an advantage. I have a little bit more privilege. I'm very educated, and I knew that I had constitutional rights, and I knew to connect with resources to help become a community buy-in, because this was my community before I became unhoused. So if you become unhoused in the community you were in, it would be a good idea to connect with the resources in your community first, and then build a buy-in. So if something happens to you, or someone like the bids or some crazy resident attacks or starts some rumors or whatever, to support you and keep an eye on them and start to investigate them. That changes things too. That's my suggestion.
Yeah.
Always be neat if you can.
Oh my goodness, yes. Pick up your trash.
And also, one of the things I also wanted to ask, if your question is, what would you put if you had a billboard? What would you put on there for society to understand about unhoused people?
Ooh, that's tough. I mean, right now it's just in my head because we're literally fighting. The city of Las Vegas is trying to pass an ordinance that would ban homeless from sitting, standing, or sleeping on sidewalks. It'd be $1,000 fine and up to 4 months jail time. So I just keep thinking housing, not handcuffs, or housing works, or maybe housing is a right, I think would be good, or housing saved lives. Oh man, that was a whole bunch. I'm going to have a really wordy billboard that nobody's going to read.
What do you say to the residents that are out here that are against unhoused people in their communities, that are trying to push them away and saying that housing isn't a right, it's a privilege, I've worked hard all my life, and these people are just some lazy scoundrels or bums or hobos or whatever? How would you be able to try to change the course of that conversation?
I think first I like to use stats and facts, because that speaks to people that aren't emotional and attached to the homeless outside. But I think first addressing the cost of homelessness, what they're currently doing in most communities, which is the enforcement. That's a really expensive solution, and the taxpayers are paying for that. I don't think people realize that. So if you add up the jail time, the cleanup time, all the tickets, add the court, I know I can only speak to Las Vegas. I forget what the cost study is for here, but it's $50,000 for someone to be homeless, versus $22,000 to house them indoors with case management. And that's already being paid for, because you think about, you're paying for the police, you're paying for the vehicles that they're driving, you're paying for the cleanup if they use a solution to clean up anything. If people go to jail, that costs. If they go before a judge, there's a cost associated with that. Plus, if they're in jail, all the things that are associated with that, whether it be their food, their clothing, everything, that's all it costs that you're paying as a taxpayer. And I think that is what is such a shame. People don't realize this. They think get them gone and use enforcement, but that's actually an expensive solution. If it was done the right way, it would actually cost the community less, and you'd see results.
I have a question for a couple of my other unhoused audience that suffer from domestic violence. Are there any resources in Las Vegas, that can be helpful for our unhoused viewers there, our listeners there?
Yeah, we have the Shade Tree is our big one, and then we have Safe Nest. So those are for women, and unfortunately, we do a horrible job, and it's not just us. This is a nationwide thing, because I work with all the federal partners. We don't do a good job of men or LGBTQ couples. So that's what we have for women. But yeah, we're really at a loss. If you are a man or in an LGBTQ relationship fleeing domestic violence, there's nothing for you, and that is really just a shame.
I'm glad you pointed that out. That was going to be my next thing. I'm going to say I have from our transgendered and because I know one of our transgender guests had issues in shelters, and I was wondering what some things could be done to help them, for the listeners that want to really revolutionize the shelter procedures and things like that.
Well, I get to brag on our partners at the Salvation Army. We have the only Salvation Army trans dorm. So yay for being so progressive as Salvation Army, because they are a Christian organization. Mm-hmm. But I love that. And they saw the need for it, and they did it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's pretty cool. And I wish more shelters would do that, because what I have found, and I have friends that I just think the world of in the trans community, but they often get discriminated for jobs, and sometimes even within the LGBT community, they get discriminated, and shunned. And so it is a hard road, and they might have been cut off from family. If they're lucky, they will have family to support them, but they might not have anybody. And so we really, really need to step up and do better for our trans community.
What are the resources in Las Vegas for people, let's say, for example, this is their first time being unhoused, and they need some help, some direction? That may not necessarily be, they are not disabled, or they are not in the situations that I just described.
I would say if they can, there's a couple agencies. There's Help Us Southern Nevada. That's fantastic, and they're out on the streets, so they have teams that go out and stuff, so it's easy to find them, and they can direct you. They're out a street outreach. And then there's also any of the Clark County social service offices, and they are all over the place in the valley. And if you can get in there, they'll do a housing assessment, they'll help you get to resources. But then there's also down by where the shelters are. It's called the Care Complex, and there's all the shelters are kind of right next to each other in downtown Las Vegas. But the Care Complex is open every day but Sunday. But they are just there. They let people have their mail get sent there. All sorts of good resources. I love them because they just make they make stuff happen. Yeah. They're good. Private funding.
Oh, that's great. So here's another one I have because I want to try to put the same thing, what can happen here, we can do as well as in Las Vegas. I met a gentleman who has a wife who suffers from some challenges in mental health. And I was wondering if that is the situation in Las Vegas, what resources are there for them?
Well, we're different in Nevada versus California. It was actually as horrible as mental health care is here. It's worse in Nevada, if that's possible, because it's still state run. Back in the 80s, everybody went back to the county. Ours didn't, and so it's still state run. So it's okay, but it's not the best. But we do have Southern Nevada Adult Mental Health, and they have resources, and they have funding for housing, and they have excellent case managers. So I'd tell somebody if they're struggling with that, get over there, and they can help you and point you in the right direction. And if you have insurance, they even help you get to who's covered by your insurance. So they're wonderful.
Which brings another question: Who are the best supporters in for Las Vegas?
Yeah. Nevada.
Yeah. To help unhoused people, which ones would you like to give a shout out to so people can either donate or help amplify some of the services because it's such a big thing that's going on around the country? Which ones would you pick out?
There's so many good ones, and I mean that. But there's one that obviously U.S. Vets because they're our partner on the garden. But Straight from the Streets in the Care Complex. Straight from the Streets has been around since late 80s, early 90s. And Linda Randall L. founded it because she saw until that point, it was everybody sitting in their offices waiting for the homeless to come to them. She said, this isn't right. We need to go out where the people are. And so she started street outreach in Southern Nevada. So she passed about 4 years ago. And so it's her widow that carries it on. And he works full time. And so it's all volunteer run. And they're amazing. And they will do literally anything it takes. So I love them. And then also the Care Complex, which I mentioned before. They're great too. They have a center down by the shelters on Four Master Lane, and same kind of attitude. Anything it takes, they'll do it to get people where they need to be to that next step.
One other thing I forget, I have an unhoused individual that is an immigrant, but doesn't have all of his papers. And I know that this is going on in Las Vegas too, and I want to include as many as my community members and my friends as possible. So this is for you. You know who you are. I don't want to say your name, but this is, here's the question. Where are resources for those population that are in a fear, that are working, but they are afraid that at any moment that Donald Trump's ICE team will come and sweep them up? What would you suggest?
So that's actually an Obama administration leftover. I don't know if you're aware of that law and that crazy stuff. That's actually Obama. Yeah, so HUD has said, which is Housing and Urban Development, has said that you can house people and there are loopholes. And so housing agencies will know how to work through those. But also I don't have one on me. But there are these cards, and basically if ICE does come to your door, you don't have to open the door. You don't have to let them in. They have to have a search warrant. And I think people get scared and they don't know that. So that's another good thing to know, is that you don't have to open your door if they come, but also that if you do need help, there are loopholes and agencies can get around them to help you.
Okay, that's going for people that have houses, but what if they are unhoused?
I'm talking about unhoused.
Oh, okay, because you
don't. I'm
don't.
talking about for housing.
Yes, right. Okay, because I'm going to say as well. You're correct that Obama did do that, but who really pushed for it was unfortunately, particularly here in Los Angeles, they have been around. And Trump is now extolling it. And so what I wanted to actually tie up and say is, if you have any challenges in Las Vegas or anywhere else, please keep abreast of our station here. We keep things we're trying to keep you informed and trying to find the best solutions for you to be safe, to find some housing, as well as to navigate out here, because it is very different, what I've noticed, to live in the house than live on the street, because there's a lot of things that is very, very different. And it's also very different if you live in a car, because those are other dimensions, or if you have from the LGBTQI index of the community as well. If there's anything else you want to add, Meredith?
No, just that every city is really different. So definitely, to reiterate what you'd said, to get connected to the local resources, I think is well advised. Yeah.
Is there anything people can do to donate to your agency?
Yep, you can find us online. Caridad, CARIDAD, charity, the word charity spelled out, so .com, or we're Caridad LV for Las Vegas on Facebook and Instagram.
Thank you very much, Meredith. You came all the way from Las Vegas, come to take some time to spend with us.
Ooh, I'm tired. I've been traveling all day to get to you.
Thank you, guys, for listening, and may we again meet in the light of understanding. We the Unhoused is a podcast we record every week. We interview people from different places, and we use our resources in order for it to make it happen. And up to now, we've been depleting all types of energy, time, and patience to give you a quality product. Now, you will not hear our recordings in a live, quiet studio, but what you will hear is where we meet the clients or the listeners and the guests at these places where they are. In order for this to continue, we're going to need some help for a lot of things, like a new phone. My phone is dying. My computer, I have none. Different other equipment in order for us to start a new project where we will have We the Unhoused for people that are want to share their stories visually, and then we're going to have a podcast for We the Unhoused for children. So in order for this to happen, we're going to need a lot of help from our listeners and for people that are interested in doing something for the community. And after this, if you would like to contribute to this campaign, you can contact We the Unhoused on Twitter. That's my thing, where I have a PayPal link, and you can link it there, and you can make any donation from $2 to $5 or however you feel. But it's really appreciated. Right now, I'm walking across the street from the park to interview a couple of more unhoused people and find out their situation and how they feel about the sweep. What's your name, sir? Terrence. Well, Terrence, what happened yesterday?
It was a park ranger cleanup. Apparently, they wanted to clean up this part of the park that we live in, and I guess the cleanup was us leaving that area.
Was it supposed to be today or yesterday? Or?
It was supposed to be today.
That was yesterday.
No, yesterday. Today's the 6th. Right?
Today's the 5th.
Today's the 5th. Okay, so on the 4th, but it rained. But they came and dismantled everything. So.
What amount of time did they give you to move?
None.
We weren't here.
None. They didn't give us any time. So what happened was they were supposed to come tomorrow, and that's fair. But it rained, and that's an act of God. What didn't happen was a secondary notice of what we should do. Mm-hmm. So under normal assumptions, we assumed, all right, we'll just live our life. We go to the church to collect something, right? It was a free giveaway during the church had, and it's been on the books on the weeks, right? So we go there, come back, all of our stuff's missing. Well, not all of it, a lot of it's missing, and these things. And yeah, no notice, no nothing.
This angers me because I'm over near the Alpine Park, and the fact that I've had this very same thing happen to me just really ticks me off. But I truly understand. I've had to move my things, and they never cleaned. They kept it there just to keep me out, like any other unhoused person.
Yeah. They didn't even clean.
This is a tactic that Mitchell Farrell and any of the other council members do deliberately to displace unhoused people. I see another resident that I interviewed a while ago. Bob, what happened with your stuff?
Well, they broke my phone. I have about $6,000 worth of brand new clothes that are ruined because they threw it in the fucking mud. They put me in handcuffs for 45 minutes because I was going to kill the son of a bitch.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I can understand you're upset because I would probably want to strangle him myself. So,
I have 10 tents that they broke in half that are no good. People can't live in them now. And I will not accept a smaller tent than what I had because my stuff will not fit in it.
My apologies for that. So Mitchell Farrell just stated to the public that they don't have enough money for housing for unhoused people. But yet somehow they found $258 million for more police, after they have an already bloated police budget. So where is this money going? I got a feeling we know it's right on this police sweeps and these kind of ridiculous raids. Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Terrence, and Iman as well. I'm going to go down and interview a few more people just to see what their reactions to this ridiculous sweep was. So can you give us a brief description of what happened to you?
Well, I am a youth TAY. I've been going through the shelter system for about 8 months, in and out. I needed a tent, so I went to go get me one. Eventually had some money saved up to go get a tent at least. So it was confusing to me because I didn't know that. I thought the park was public property. I thought that this would be somewhere where we can go put our tents up, and then go find somewhere to go shower, put our stuff that we need and our necessary needs at that moment. I don't really expect people of money, people who bring us stuff, to take those stuff away, throw it away, and be the responsible of it. I just feel like they're just picking on us at this point.
I have to share that sentiment for you. How long have you been unhoused?
I've been unhoused for almost a year and a half.
How did you get to this situation? Some have illness, some have...
Mental health, mental health. I just have a few mental health issues that I'm working through. I'm trying my best. But it's hard when you got people kicking you out every 5 seconds because you don't have a job or you don't have the means to get the income. But when you do have GR and they say, oh, well, that's enough to come into the shelter for 30 days or 90 days, but that's not enough for you to get a job. That's not enough for you to get your medication together. Make sure you're not drowsy at work. Make sure you're not upset, or make sure you're not having to deal with everybody else's drama that you live with. Like, it's a lot of stuff that goes on to be in these shelters. It's not just you have a bed all the time.
And not to mention the draconian rules they have. Every little minor thing could result of you being expelled out of the shelter. Have you experienced that in these shelters?
Yeah, a lot of strict ruling. The last shelter or place of being I was supposed to be in was a program off of Avalon, and it was a nice shelter to have us, for curfew. But if we didn't make it to our curfew at 10 o'clock, then we would have to be sitting outside in the cold, basically. So if you're trying to go find a job, if you're trying to come from way yonder to go get plasma or whatever you're doing to go get your income, they're not going to let you in on that day because you didn't make it to 10 o'clock. But you can come back. It's just that was a ruling because I'll still be outside in the cold and I'll still have nowhere to go.
See, this is the tiptoe stands that unhoused people undergo, and when you hear people talking about the people don't want services, this is the reality that they don't tell you about. So what happened when you came this morning and they found they had to move? What was going on?
I just found that I either got to go find somewhere on the sidewalk versus a park, which is like, it's kind of cruel and unusual punishment because it's like, we can put it on the sidewalk, but we can't put it in the park. That makes no sense to me. Which one would you rather be if you were in my shoes? Would you rather be in a park, or would you rather be on the hard ground where you basically are hurting yourself and damaging your own body just by going to sleep?
So I didn't get your name. What's your name, ma'am?
Soraya.
Soraya, I wanted to ask you, what would you want the audience or the viewers, listeners to take away with this in helping you? How would they best help you?
I don't know at this point. Just try the best to see if we can vote for more housing for our, youth, for any homeless youth or any homeless, well, I'm saying youth because I'm 22, just give us more chances to show that we can pay for their bills and we can get on a program and do the program if we would have the freedom in order to go to our appointments and freedom to do the things that we need to do and go get a job and make sure we in these programs and go to school. Like, if I had a stable place to be, I would be back in school at this point. Like, I know what I want to do. I just need somewhere to be.
There you have it, from the people that have experienced it, instead of well-dressed lawmakers and angry residents that are living in a house and have the affordability to sneer and thumb their nose and punch down on the vulnerable. This is the reality that unhoused people face. Thank you again for listening. Good afternoon. This is Theo Henderson from We the Unhoused, and in the studios today is a fellow warrior in the War of Unhoused and the Revolution. Her name is Tondo Kaduka, and Tondo Kaduka hails from, I want to say, central or Midwest Michigan. Am I correct, or did I get this wrong?
So, in a roundabout way, ended up in mid-Michigan. Actually was born and raised in South Africa, and then went to Michigan for my schooling, and now I live in Oakland, California.
Oh, excellent. So welcome to Oakland, California, and we are calling Los Angeles. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and how did you become involved in a little bit into trauma care? Just a short statement.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I actually started my work in corporate, very hierarchical, very autocratic, very mundane and banal. It wasn't until I actually got sick and I realized what the wellness strategy required that I ended up in mental health. And through my own educational experiences, I've learned about advocacy, stigma and discrimination reduction, attended a year-long training program where I learned the values of wellness and recovery within the mental health dioramas. And so I was able to use that experience, the training program, to actually find work within the Alameda County behavioral health field. And so now I have been at peer-run, community-based organizations for the last 15 years. And by peer-run, I mean that the organizations themselves, 51% of the organization, the board members, as well as the people that work there, the employees, have lived experience with a mental health challenge, and they are very vocal about that.
I think that's excellent. I was from the school of, like, as you know, we went through Aquinas. I was informed only about a certain model of mental health care. And like many of us, if you've gone into higher education, which is the DSM-4, you were mentioning in our conversations earlier about trauma-informed care. Can you tell us the difference between trauma-informed care and the current model of the DSM-4? What are your thoughts on that?
So the DSM is really, from everything that I've heard, it's something that is a guide. It's a tool, right?
Yes.
It's not necessarily to be used to diagnose people, so to speak. But that's exactly what happens in the field.
Right.
It is definitely the biomedical model, which is very much hierarchical, very much autocratic, very much the psychiatrist or the clinician telling you what is wrong with you and what you need to do to fix it. And so for myself, I found that model to be really, really inflexible. I was I think in my learning curve of what depression was and what it meant and how I could take care of myself, I was able to find the dimensions of wellness through SAMHSA, and that is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health. What is that? SAMHSA, that's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services. I forget what the A stands for. But anyways, it's a federal program, right? And through SAMHSA, they have the dimensions of wellness. One of the dimensions of wellness is actually peer recovery model. And the peer recovery model is exactly that. It puts the strength back onto the individual who is challenged with a mental health condition, and it says you are in the driver's seat, and it is up to you to realize you have agency, you have self-determination, you have choices. It's up to you to decide what is going to work best for you and your particular challenge. And so for obvious reasons, I fell in love with the peer recovery model because it allowed for the intersectionality of all of myself. It allowed for a wealth of personal wisdom, the practical judgment. It allowed for my leadership experience to come in. And more so than anything else, it allowed me to be empowered within my treatment modality. So, and then trauma-informed care, trauma-informed care is actually used for clinicians. And I personally am a huge fan of trauma-informed care in that, I would love to give you a definition of trauma-informed care. As it stands right now, there isn't one acceptable definition that is used across the board. But all trauma-informed care says is, what we see the person first, so it's person-centered care. And it does not look at the illness modality. It actually looks at wellness. So what is it that you need to be and to stay well? Trauma-informed care, I think, also addresses the social justice aspects of, and I think that we are going to be talking about this a little bit later on, but it addresses the social justice aspects of poverty. Why does poverty occur? How is it that we can take the steps to eradicate poverty? And why is that poverty in a capitalistic society especially is a man-made, human-made phenomenon? Because it is. We're all literally one paycheck away from being unhoused. And so how is it that we can create humane policies that act as a safety net, that bridge the gap for people that are disenfranchised and don't have a lot of assistance? So trauma-informed care, I think, is really more holistic. It looks at the entire individual as well as their environment. The DSM manuals, and I believe it's 1 through 5 now, but I think we've been talking about DSM-4. If it is a DSM-4, it looks at just the illness and the pathology of the illness, and that's it.
Let me ask you this. How can I get myself together if I have a break using trauma-informed care? I know many unhoused people would like to be able to have the agency to be able to correct if they have a break. What would I need to do if I had one out here on the street?
I think it's really one of those things that if it is that I am experiencing a break, then I might need the assistance of Good Samaritans. And so if it is that I am experiencing a break, how do I advocate for the care that I need when it is that I am surrounded with Good Samaritans? I think it might be a better question. Can I answer that one?
I'm going to lead into that one. As a business owner, calling the police, is that a good idea? Or should I, as a community member, what training do I need to be able to help you be safe and
Exactly.
deal with the situation you have?
One of the most important things is, especially, let's say, for example, I'm a business person, right? And someone is experiencing a break in my store. I think the most important thing is first of all, I need to check myself. Do I have any internalized stigma and discrimination around, do I have a bias, for example, around mental illness? If it is that I have a bias, can I call someone else to be of assistance? I think that it's really important to be humane with someone that is experiencing a break. So listening skills, empathy, having foresight, having an awareness, being persuasive, all of these skills are very important characteristics, as well as addressing my bias. That one I think is paramount. Most individuals that are at statistics actually tell us that most people that are unhoused, most people that have a mental health challenge are more inclined to have violence occur against them than to be violent. If I'm experiencing a break, honestly, I'm not going to be violent in your store. But what I do need is some assistance. And maybe I am able to advocate for myself in that moment. I personally do not think that it needs to be the police department. I think that a lot of communities have mobile crisis teams or crisis intervention street teams that are on the street 24/7 to coordinate the care for me, the individual. That is, quite honestly, it's not the job of the police. It's not the job of the police or the fire department I think that it is a sad case where most individuals, and once again, this is a statistic, most individuals will receive their first treatment strategies while they are in jail. Jail actually happens to be the largest hospital in the United States for individuals that are unhoused, as well as have mental health challenges. I find that socially and societally to be unacceptable. We need to do better. We need to do more. We need to offer more alternatives to just calling the police.
My question,
I hope that answered your question.
It does. My question is to follow up on that is that many times, particularly in Chinatown, we have a business improvement district that is very aggressive to unhoused people, in particular to people of color and people that are having these breaks that they have. And one of the things that they do is their go-to is always has been to the police. Right now, that they had last Thursday, the neighborhood prosecutor for misdemeanors in the meeting looking at a person that has challenges and sending them to arrest and prosecute people that have these challenges, like at that jail mental health hospital. So the follow-up is
right.
A lot of it is due to ignorance and a lot of it is due to poor education.
Right.
How can the media help in spreading the word on trauma-informed care?
You know, I'm really hesitant on using the media on any of these things. The reason being, you know, there've been several movies that have come out just this past year. One of them was, I don't know if I can say this, but it was Batman. I don't know if you guys, but anyways, let me continue. Where the Joker had mental health challenges.
Yeah.
And it was so stigmatizing.
Mm-hmm.
It was so stigmatizing, right? And I think that in terms of the media has a narrative. And usually you will find it the school shootings, for example, right? Oh, well, it was a mental health challenge. Well, no, that's not true. It was not a mental health challenge. It was violence. Those are two diametrically opposed sensibilities. Just because I have a mental health challenge does not mean that I am violent. Just because I am violent does not mean that it is because of a mental health challenge. I hope that makes sense. And so we have to be able to differentiate in the community who our allies are going to be. Myself personally, I don't use the media as an ally because I find them I find them with their philosophy is, if it leads, it bleeds. So let's sensationalize it, let's sensationalize it, let's sensationalize it. Unfortunately, that's not going to work when it is about stigma reduction and education. Then what we need for stigma reduction and education, and what we found, once again, statistically, is the more interfacing I have with someone that is different than myself, the more likely my walls are going to come down and the humanity is going to rise up. And so really the question is, with the business district, how do we create safe places, safe zones where the business community can meet the unhoused community, or maybe meet the mental health challenge community in an area that is neutral for everyone? Get everyone to get to know one another. It sounds really old-fashioned, because it is, but it also works really, really well. And the reason for that is because I see you. I see your humanity. I see your, the blood, the bone, the grit. I see all of that. And it becomes very, very difficult for me to demonize you when it is, I can see your humanity. So I would say for the business district, what would be really important is actually being able to create the safe spaces. It does require a different kind of work, but I think that it's preventative work that I've actually seen succeed in Northern California in our.
But Tondo, here's another thing that I've noticed, and I want your aspect on it. I've had several people close to me that have had like life-changing illnesses. For example, one that was terminally ill. And one of the things that I remembered when we would go and take care of them, they were not at their best, obviously. They were sometimes disorientated. They were went to the bathroom on themselves. They just basically it's not worth, the agency was lost in the respect that they were going through illness. And so what I'm
Right.
alluding to is the fact that that wasn't the time for me to pull out a camera and witness them at their best. What do you think of the phenomenon of, you see people now when people are going through the challenges, as we are trying to normalize and humanely look at the same situation from mental health or people that are having substance usage, of recording them and not at their best moment? Is that says something about our humanity, or do you think that's a good, wise idea for us to do that? Because
I think honestly that's classic shaming. We're shaming the individual. I am seeing you at your absolute worst, where you can't even advocate for yourself. And then I'm going to spotlight and highlight you at your absolute worst to make a point. And the point is, shame on you for being ill, right? And yes, do we live in a shame-based society? Absolutely. Do we live in a fear-based society? Absolutely. But I think that we need to recognize when it is that there are certain incidences that will either add to the stigma, or they will support why people are being discriminated against. As far as I'm concerned, something like that happening, and I've seen it, something like that happening is atrocious. It's absolutely, utterly atrocious. And I have no other words for it. I can't believe that someone would do that to another human being. That is dehumanizing another person.
How can we galvanize people to come around unhoused people instead of us galvanizing to get rid of them?
Exactly. How do we build alliances in the community? One of the places is actually the Board of Supervisors. I think that you're probably familiar with the Board of Supervisors. I'm pretty sure that you know who your supervisor is.
Yes.
Say that again?
Well, unfortunately, because their solution is they're taking their lead, two of the Board of Supervisors is taking their lead from Dr. Drew Binsky, who's running around saying mental health people because he has experience in
That's what yes, exactly.
with,
if it is that they have a voice, right? And it is the voice of the very, very few, as well as ARC conservative voice, then we also need to come in with our own voice to counter that one. I really do think, and I've seen it work, where community organizers like yourself, Theo, are able to bring in a group of people, like-minded individuals, who want to address a very specific policy measure. And they are able to do it, especially with the Board of Supervisors, to say, hey, you know what? I'm in your district. I vote. I'm a constituent. I matter. And this is my issue. The truth of the matter is that we are not at the County Board of Supervisors, and we need to be. The County Board of Supervisors, a lot of them, especially in California, how it's broken down, 50 plus odd states, is that the County Board of Supervisors is actually the one that creates the policy for mental health care. It goes through the County Board of Supervisors. And so I really think it is imperative that when there are votes that are about our mental health, when there are votes that are about unhoused laws or city ordinances or codes, that we be in those rooms. We be in the rooms before the laws are passed, and we are in the rooms as constituents, as citizens, as voters. It makes a huge difference. I've seen the tide turn when it is that we provide our own anecdotal evidence and we provide our personal narrative, and we do it in such a way that it reaches across all of that arc conservatism and the fear mongering that demagogues have a tendency to do. And I'm not naming any names, but I am saying LA County definitely has a demagogue. And yeah, let's see if we can topple him.
I agree. I think one of the, like you stated earlier, about the media has had a hand in it. Also listening to anti-unhoused rhetoric like Dr. Dupinski.
Right, exactly.
From the Union Rescue Mission, talking about get rid of supportive housing, just throw them in shelters or send them off into the desert.
I mean, that's demagoguery. That's demagoguery, and that has no place at all whatsoever in a democracy. And it certainly doesn't have a place at all in the 21st century, right? The truth of the matter is that between the Department of Public Health and the Board of Supervisors, we have to realize, either as members of the unhoused population or as members of the mental health awareness population, we have to realize that the system has never been designed for us. The system is a warehouse, and it is to isolate and to hide us. It is oppressive. It is traumatic. It's very traumatic. And so when it is that, whether it's the Department of Public Health or the Board of Supervisors, they say that, you know, it's not about a lack of hospital beds. They'll say that we don't have the space. We don't have the room. It's about a lack of hospital beds. No. It's about redesigning the whole system. It's about us as constituents getting involved, attending hearings, making public statements, highlighting at the time of making the public statement which district we're in, and it's definitely that we're a voter. And it's also making sure that we hold our elected officials accountable. That's the only way to do it. Honestly, if we want to see change, we have to be where change occurs. And we have to be in those arenas, and we have to be comfortable in those spaces.
Okay.
You know, there's currently 10 million people in LA County, and it is the County of Los Angeles Board of Supervisors, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th district. So knowing that, I think it's also important to know that for the annual budget, this is for 2012, 2013, the annual budget for the County of Los Angeles Public Health was $893 million. $893 million. That's close to $1 billion. So if it is that someone is saying that we need to, I don't know, leave LA County and move elsewhere. No, I think what we need to do is actually hold LA County accountable. Where is close to $1 billion going if it is that it's not in service to the people that greatly need it the most?
One of the things that I've noticed for a fact is that most of the money that I've noticed anytime when we're dealing with the unhoused crisis, which is over 600,000 people and growing daily, is the fact that they allocate a lion's share of the money to police officers or police services to go and, like you state, police or incarcerate the unhoused, mentally ill individuals and unhoused people in general who don't follow the ordinances. So therein lies where some of the money goes. The other monies go with business improvement district communities that use them as a finder's fee or as a scout, if you want, on a diabolical nature to find these unhoused mental health people and to get them into the net of the police department. So what is your thoughts on that?
It's really quite possible to divert the money that is going to the police departments, for example, and use it for crisis intervention teams. Crisis intervention teams would do the same work that the police officers are doing, but they are actually trained clinicians. They're trained peer providers, and they are trained individuals who can actually de-escalate a crisis, and then they determine whether or not the person needs to be in a hospital or perhaps even respite care. Maybe it's not even a hospital, right? And so I really do think that, once again, the system has never been designed for us. And so how do we advocate to divert funding away from police departments and into humane, holistic services like crisis intervention teams, or even even respite care, which is very similar to a hospital. The respite care is in a residential neighborhood. I am not isolated. I am still part of the community. My illness, so to speak, is normalized. It's part of the human condition. And I've got maybe 2 to 3 weeks to stay to respite care and take care of myself, and figure out what my treatment strategies are going to be, right? So there are a lot of options besides the police department, is what I'm trying to say. But we need to be able to advocate and get involved.
Well, I thank you again, Tondo, for taking your time out of your busy schedule. In light of the Steve Lopez's article that basically demonizes unhoused and people with these health challenges, this is a very timely message. We have a 5-part series, so Tondo, I invite you to come back for the rest of the series. But again, thank you for your time, and we're going to shut off right here. This is Theo Henderson from We the Unhoused, and thank you guys for listening. May we again meet in the light of understanding. I want to switch gears here, and I want to introduce another gentleman here. This was Black Wolf. I like the black theme. So I want to just say welcome, Black Wolf, and I would like to give the mic to you. Tell us your story. I want to hear it.
Hi, my name's David Lopez, otherwise known as Black Wolf. I actually left my house from my own reasons, and there was just a lot of family, disruptions, a lot of losses. People have died of sicknesses. Some people, like my uncle, he passed away in the dialysis room. My grandmother, she was drinking and taking pills off of depression. So a lot of that kind of stays in my family, aside from diabetes and heart failure. Me personally, I've gone through a lot. I have PTSD, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, paranoia, and my partner, Black Lily, she pretty much helps me cope with that from a day-to-day basis. The reason why I'm on the streets is because I was trying to get my record clean, trying to clear my name, trying to be a better person. I mean, I used to be a house person. I used to be upper middle class. I would go out of my way and come out to the people that aren't house and get money out of my own pocket to help them, like, try to enlighten themselves and see to it that there aren't really bad people out here. And now that I'm unhoused and I'm on the streets, I'm still doing my part to try and make the best of it and help my community out.
I think that's very well spoken. Can you tell me what was it like your first time to be unhoused? What did you feel? What was going through your head?
That I was never gonna make it back to where I was, and that there's probably certain substances that are probably gonna help me like stay where I was and be stuck there.
Incidentally, that's very true. I can recall the first time I was unhoused, the fear and the because I didn't sleep a wink. I guess I had no idea because there is no manual to be out here unhoused. People have this nonsensical belief that people just go around with big shopping carts, but the reason they have those is because of survival things to survive. I didn't know that because I was uninitiated. The second question I would like to ask is like, how long have you been unhoused?
Me personally, I've been unhoused since I was about 16, so about 10 years now. Well, it will be 10 years next year, but 9 years total.
So how are you able to, because it sounds like you're reasonably resilient, it's obviously, and obviously resourceful. What keeps you from plunging into the forces of depression or getting off track, if you will?
Surrounding yourself with good people that kind of relate to you.
Very well.
Like asking them what are their reasons for being out here, and sitting down with these people and actually setting a common goal.
As you can hear, that this is the same kind of philosophy that housed people have as well as unhoused people. We're really not that different. It's just that some kind of way we've been dehumanized and made to feel like we're an other. There was a few weeks ago in Echo Park in the rain, park rangers came and confiscated. There's a disabled man. He has multiple sclerosis, and there's other people who have all sorts of challenges in this park. They went and confiscated their things. They put some of it in the trash. They handcuffed the guy, detained the guy, and one of the guys, and they started to speak out and stand up for themselves. And one of the park rangers' responses was, "You're the only person that sees that they are human." That therein lies the challenges. And then when I had my own experiences when I was in Alpine and hearing the staff whine about it's not fair, they don't see, it's not about you being black or unhoused, but it's actually that. It's just that they're so insidious, that they are so implicitly biased, they can never possibly see the track record that they did. Which brings up why I say this is because this is the nucleus of how 4118, 6444, and 5802 has been realized. It's the implicit bias about people. It's the implicit ideas that people are a danger, or as one of the guys there told me, you should move your things away because you're too near children. Or, they think you're setting up or you're going to do something to the kids. It's the idea that you are not a community member. You're not a human being. And they want you to fall in line with that dehumanizing and insulting practice. So what is your thoughts on 4118?
Pretty much, in my general opinion, stemming from what you said, is these people were pretty much doing everything in their power to lower our morale.
Mm-hmm.
The lower our morale is out here, it's a higher chance for them to just say, "Hey, man, you got to get your shit and go."
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much, I mean, to me, I've been in compliance with everything that these LAPD have released so far so good. And it's just, I would say, if people could look at my example and follow from what I'm doing, we won't have trouble.
My issue is this, and I if you feel free to jump in, Black Lily, is the fact that do you all consider yourselves American citizens?
Yeah.
Yes, I was born on American soil. David was, Black Wolf was born on American soil. If you're born on American soil, you're American. You're an American citizen, whether you pay taxes or not. Period.
Okay, so therein, this is and follow with me with what I'm going with this line of questioning. Is that why is it that people feel that unhoused people are not accorded the same civil rights and the dignities that housed people do? So, what is your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I think it has to stem from, it's not just about unhoused people. It's more of the fact that they see us as weaker. For years and centuries, people have been wanting to dehumanize somebody else just because of them being weak, just because of them being different, just because of where they live, just because of how they live, and because of their culture. For years, we've been dehumanizing people. It's not just the homeless people that have been receiving it. Like, if you look at it, homelessness has been around for a while. But honestly, all that we ask for is just a little bit of respect. Honestly.
Yeah.
And I agree. The respect goes a long way. However, I want to also talk about respect, civil rights, and then two, the first of the year, and just to let everyone know on this listing, the first of the year, Mitch O'Farrell, the mayor, and the LAPD have been having backroom talks. They have half-heartedly let the care teams have less police practice. But behind the societies, behind scrutiny, they have been sweeping places like Koreatown, Echo Park, and it's partly because of the fact that they have been getting backlash from housed residents. However, here is the irony of the whole situation is that no matter where they do all these raids, there is nowhere for the unhoused to go. They are still going to be unhoused. They must look like they are doing something. But have you heard anything of any mayor, Mitch O'Farrell, or any city council member as speaking out against the vigilantism that has been going on with unhoused people? Have you heard? I have not. But
no, I haven't. I haven't heard of any
Mayor
vigilantism.
Garcetti came down to speak with us that one time, but I don't know if he's for us or against us.
For as far as I've seen, Mayor Garcetti, as far as I've seen from what he's done in the past, is he's against the homeless.
His direct words was his job is to make the Republicans and the liberals angry. He wants to make the Republicans angry because he wants to spend money on the unhoused. He wants to make the liberals angry because they can't sleep near parks or schools or things like that. So the 4118 was his brainchild, along with Mike Fuhrer, Mitch O'Farrell, the Board of Supervisors. They all have got this, and Nury Martinez, by the way, has gotten together to foment this kind of dehumanization campaign.
Well, you have to see it this way, too, that if we're going to be forced out into the desert, we're just going to be forced to just survive as much as we've been doing. It's just going to be different. Instead, we're going to be building our own huts out there. And it's like, if you're really going to be mad about the homeless people being in the city and you want them out, stop blaming the fires on us. Stop, making us the bad guys, because we're just trying to survive. You push us out into the desert, it's just going to be what's the difference? What's the difference?
It's a concentration camp. That's the difference. That's what it is.
No, what it is they're pushing us away from resources that can help us get off the streets.
And most importantly, when in the Nazi Germany, this is exactly like that. The first thing when I was in college and I interviewed some of the Holocaust survivors, the thing of it is they did not just go out and just scoop them up. They used a steady campaign, like I would be very hard-pressed to believe that they haven't modeled and observed this, is the campaign of always having the outside forces generate the public outcry. My observation is the police officers are behind it as well. They will go to business owners, they will go to residents and force them and make the story so horrific that you see this mentally ill guy, he's walking around with a bag of feces. Do you want them around your children? They make the story so horrific that the dehumanization campaign goes on unabated. And then after that momentum going on, once you send out people to the camps, they're going to have no recourse. They're not going to be able to fight back because they are usually beaten down by the police, park rangers, city, house residents. They've been so used to conditioned to be dehumanized, they would just go along with it. But many of the unhoused are disabled, ill, they need surgeries and things like that. They can't survive out there in the camps because they, like a few days ago, a few people have been passing away. So that's where we're going. And that's why we must, all of us as the unhoused, we must unite and speak out against this. We cannot shift our, drop our shoulders and our heads. We need to say something.
And I completely agree. I've actually, you can ask Black Wolf here, whenever I go to Salvation Army, like there's been a few times where I've tried to get people to speak up because there's some resource centers that have gone around, making some really shitty rules because of the laws that are around. And it's like I've been trying to get people to speak up. A lot of y'all think that we don't have a voice. But honestly, when you really think about it, if we group together, if we connect together, stand together as a homeless community, do you realize that the homeless community overruns the housed population? Let that sink in for a minute. Let that sink in for a minute. There are more homeless citizens here in America than there are citizens that own their own house.
Now imagine as well if those unhoused citizens banded together and it became a very strong political voice and put in the walking papers of the Business Improvement District and these small but vocal outliers are finding voice or finding audience in council members' office, mayor's office, and ultimately the city attorneys who's creating these draconian laws and knowing that they are not have any concern about unhoused people at all. They just want the money and more buildings. So Black Wolf, let me ask you a question. Sure. If you had a billboard and you were tasked to educate the populace about being unhoused, what would your billboard be?
Stand up for what's right and unite to stand strong against the common enemy. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Mental Health. We're going to be doing a 5-part series, but I wanted to touch base and recap on some things that is very interesting to note. Unhoused or housed, we all share a common garment of destiny. We are connected. But when it's a full-time job when you're unhoused and you're constantly harassed by supposedly the people that are supposed to have your interests as well as housed members. When it's unfair and unbalanced, it happens to put your body through some neurochemical stresses, the fight or flight response, and it causes mental health issues, whether you want to or not. It causes trauma. Our episode explored this with mental health advocate Tanu Gaduka, as well as Meredith, as well as some of the incidents that some of our guests have talked about. The lack of care and the lack of indifference our community has. Too often we have been painted by the visible unhoused. We see the unhoused that are talking to themselves or having a moment of disruption in realities, and then they are basically having a breakdown due to our societal's disdain for poor and people that are in poverty. It is up to us to embrace new ways in order to help them. Criminalization is not a new way. It has been here since the 1800s, and it hasn't done anything then, and it will not do anything now. We must embrace new ideas, just as we do with science, technology, and anything that deals with the arts. We must embrace something such as trauma-informed care, how we as communities deal with people with trauma issues, and how we deal with on a legal method of how to deal with unhoused people that have these challenges. What is humane is saying we're all in this together and we're going to do something about it. What is inhumane is talking about that you're going to force compliant enforcement behaviors, thinking that is going to solve the problem because you're afraid to confront the people that are harassing unhoused people because you're one of the harassers. If you really want to change things to make unhoused people's lives a little more with dignity and care and humaneness, you will seek out at every turn to reach for trauma-informed care. You will also reach out and create the housing and places for them to be instead of forcing them into positions like where it's going. Desert internment camps is not the answer. And that is the answer where Donald Trump is leading to, Eric Garcetti is leading to, as well as the council member that disdain unhoused people. So if we were to do something, we need to be able to re-examine our biases, again, our ways, our resources, and start to make budget cuts against the police officers and council members and put them into the appropriate places. And that is for mental health, housing, affordable housing, and making steps to make sure that when someone may become a chronic unhoused person, that we have the ladder to be able to hold on so they can hold on, and maybe we could change the dynamic of what is unhoused. We need an education platform. Every time I look around, I look into schools and I see the most ridiculous of things. We see police officers on Christmas and Thanksgiving running around presenting themselves as officer friendly. We have bootlickers that run around and says that not all police officers are bad. But the problem is we're not talking about individuals. We're talking about a system that allows police officers to break the law, harass unhoused people because they know that they are defenseless and they cannot do anything. We're talking about an education system overhaul that teaches the school, the staff, as well as the kids how to be able to interact with unhoused people, because there are in our schools, the kids are there now. And if you have NIMBYs yelling and spouting and evil things and police officers giving out feces sandwiches, or unhoused residents or neighborhood business council throwing explosive devices at unhoused people, then we are the criminals, not the unhoused. We need to step back, re-examine ourselves, check ourselves, and understand that there are consequences for our actions as well. And we must strive for a peaceable, humane solution with unhoused people, which is supportive housing, discarding of criminalization, as well as an open dialogue with unhoused people, not news media, not someone finger wagging about what the unhoused situation is. Our podcasts have shown many unhoused people that have showed that they are not mentally ill in the respect that they are a danger to society, drug addicted, and they're walking around with a feces bag and are causing a chaos. There are different types of issues going on with unhoused people, and these ones are being ignored because we are so harping on the visible unhoused. I truly hope that when you're listening to these things, that you're walking away with a truer understanding of what unhoused mean in Los Angeles and around the world. This podcast so far has been traveled from Germany, Romania, Glasgow, Scotland, and it is growing because of the fact that for once, we are listening to unhoused people. We're not blaming them. We're not saying it's a personal choice. They chose the agency, all that nonsense that I've heard some reporters do, or some people try to finger wag, thinking that they're being tough with people. It is not going to work. We want to hear from them. Let the unhoused speak. And we just close our mouths and listen. Thank you for listening, and may we again meet in a light of understanding. This is a very big thank you for the people that have supported and helped me throughout. From Craig Wong of CCED, Annie Shaw from CCED, Amy, John Trong, Taiji, Zen and Mario, Carlos Nityha, he stepped in when we needed and edited the most. He has been very diligent, hardworking, and patient. And all of our guests that have came on our podcast, they took their time, they shared their stories and their heart in order for the world to be educated on our voices instead of people telling us what unhoused people feel. Thank you.